All right. Good evening, everyone. It's Michael Williams. And once again, I'd like to introduce you to Esoteric Lighthouse. We are doing episode 5. We're going over Alchemy and Hermeticism. Tonight, we're going to switch it up a little bit. Past Master Charles Watson will do the introduction.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Past Master Charles Watson. I'll introduce everyone. I'll start from the top and come on down. We got Brother Coney Vaughn on the line. We got Brother Michael Williams. We have Brother Robert House, better known as Mackey and Pike. We got Brother Stephen Barrett here. We got Brother Christopher Lewis, and we got Brother Gregory Stringer, and we should have a few more brothers chiming in as we tend to go along. So buckle up your seatbelts and get ready to take off, and we'll be at cruising altitude here in just a little bit.
All right. Once again, welcome to Esoteric Lighthouse, and I am the moderator, Michael Williams. We are a group of free and accepted Masons who just so happen to be Prince Hall affiliated, and we focus on esoteric, occult, and philosophical lessons found within Freemasonry and esotericism as a whole. This being a public forum, it is not a legal interpretation nor statement of any Grand Lodge, district, or local Masonic body. Any views or opinions expressed by the panelists are solely that of the panelists and does not represent any Grand Lodge, district, or local Masonic body or views of its officials to which our panelists hold membership. All right, going back to the topic of the night, alchemy and hermeticism. Alchemy essentially is an Arabic word that starts off with al, which is the connotation of God in Arabic, and or the God, or El in Hebrew. I misspelled that. For the highest, or El, God, and Chem or chemia, which is a Greek word that means to fuse or cast a metal. Also from Chem, which is ancient name for Egypt. In synthesis, it's alchemia, to fuse with the highest or to fuse with God. In Hebrew, alchemy is written as alchemia. Analyzing this word Kabbalistically, we see that the El and chemi are Hey and El, meaning God. Chemi, meaning as in the days. So the first part of the word is in the days of God, which clearly points to Genesis or Bereshith. We find in the alchemical story of the 7 days of creation. Then there is the letter Hey at the end of the word alchemia. Hey, or the letter Hey by itself, meaning behold, and also breath. Thus, alchemia can mean in the days of God, behold, or in the days of God, breath, according to Zohar Ha-Adam and the Man of Splendors. Alchemy continued. Alchemy is a term that is directly translated as the chemistry of God. As I mentioned on the previous slide, it's the process where we transform matter and it's manipulated consciously, or in other words, nature worked through the way of the consciousness in order to arrive to a transcendental goal. But with any science, there's a chemical process or transference from one substance to another. And this is the determining factor. We can use any science with evil will in order to accomplish a desire, or we can use any science through conscious will in order to realize the purposes and goals of creation in accordance with the laws. Enoch who was first invented the books, supposedly invented books and different sorts of writing. The ancient Greeks declared Enoch as the name of Mercury Trismegistus, or Hermes Trismegistus. And then he taught his sons, the men, in the art of building cities and enacted some admirable laws. He discovered the knowledge of the zodiac and the course of the planets. He pointed out the sons of men that they should worship God, that they should fast, and they should pray, that they should give alms to votive and offerings and the tenths. He reprobated abominable foods and he reprobated abominable foods and drunkenness and appointed festivals and sacrifices to the sun at each of the zodiacal signs, according to Hebraeus. So long as man concentrates wholly on the changing of ways and the alternatives of the world or of relativity, so long as he forgets to re identify himself with the underlying changelessness of the sea, all in spirit, all protecting spirit. Sorry. All right. Um, so, where does alchemy get its origin? It gets its origin from the Alexandrian library or something called the Serapeum. The Alexandrian library was selected by Alexander the Great as the capital, or Alexandria was selected by Alexander the Great as the capital for his empire around 320 BC, and soon it became the most powerful and influential city in the region. The original Library of Alexandria was founded in 288 BC by Ptolemy or Soter under the guidance of Demetrius the Phalarian. It was a temple to the muses, what we call today now a modern museum, and it also functioned as a research center and an academy as well as a library. The great thinkers of that age flocked to Alexandria to study and exchange ideas. The original library was located in the royal district of the city with an additional building for storage on the harbor and a daughter library located at the Serapeum in the southwest part of the city. As many as 700,000 scrolls, the equivalent of more than 100,000 modern print books, fill the shelves. The library at Alexandria is of the religious significance because of its original role as a temple. Its historical association with such Christian theologians as Origen of Alexandria, and its collection of many religious manuscripts, including rare copies of the Quran. The Serapeum or Serapeon was a great temple dedicated to the Greek Egyptian god Serapis in ancient Alexandria, founded by Ptolemy around 300 BC. It was infamously destroyed by Bishop Theophilus and the Christian mob in 391. Hermeticism. Hermeticism is also called Hermetics, also called Hermeticism, is a religious, philosophical, and esoteric tradition based on primarily writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus or thrice great Hermes, also Enoch. Um, these writings have greatly influenced Western esoteric tradition and were considered to be of the greatest importance during both the Renaissance and Reformation. The traditions trace its origins to Prisca Theologia, a doctrine that affirms the existence of a single true theology that is present in all religions and that God was given to man by God. Hermeticism and the art and science of Hermeticism. Materialistic science holds that the whole of man can be reduced to his purely material components, which are cells, molecules, and atoms, that he is nothing but his physical body. Spiritual science and all religions and all other things at hand teach that man has at least two non-physical components, a soul and a spirit. Many people cannot distinguish between the heart and the soul. It is really quite simple. Both the heart and the soul are vehicles of our emotions, feelings, and desires. But whereas the heart is the seat of the ordinary emotions which arise from the torments and sorrows or the joys and pleasures of purely physical, sensual things, the soul is the seat of the divine, spiritual emotions and impulses. The Hermetic art was the right of disposition of the subject, not only for liberating the spirit from its normal material bonds, but guaranteeing the truth of its experience in the higher order of substance. It is sought to supply and purely rational motive, which enabled the subject to withstand the temptation of the astrosphere and to follow the path upwards to the discovery of wisdom and the highest of consciousness. Spiritual alchemy. The word spirit comes from the Latin word spirere, which means to breathe. It connotates the breath of life. As used here, it signifies the inmost principle, spiritual alchemy. Therefore, therefore is concerned with the most interior plane. It works to transmute what is commonly gross into spiritual gold. Now, what can spiritual gold be? This we must find out by applying the law of correspondences. It is said that gold is the most perfect of all metals. Therefore, spiritual gold, as applied to man, must be the most perfect part of his constitution. Gold is extremely malleable and ductile. Consequently, we must seek a human principle that adapts itself to numerous states and conditions. Gold is practicably indestructible, so that which we can seek in man must be eternal. Gold is not tarnished, nor is it readily attacked by another chemical element. Let us explore human existence for an unchangeable element that remains pure and resists the acids of criticism and the fire of affliction. Gold is a precious metal that is used as a standard of value. What is the standard of value of man? It's nevertheless the linked up through association, the art of transmutation. For a long line of alchemical experimenters sought to change the base metals into gold. In addition, they sought the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, and the accomplishment of the great work. All right. Alchemy and Hermeticism leads into magic, or the origins of magic. And before we go into our discussion, I want to leave the room with something I came across, and it deals with the origins of magic and the magi. Magi, also referred to as the three wise men or the three kings, were in early Christian tradition a group of Eastern mystics who visited Jesus after his birth, bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They were regular figures in the traditional accounts of nativity celebrations of Christmas and are part of important part of Christian tradition. The earliest known usage of the word magi is in the trilingual inscription written by Darius the Great, the third king of the first Persian Empire, also known as the Achaemenid Empire. The term magi has been used since at least the 6th century BC to denote followers of Zoroaster. Zoroaster, also known Zoroaster, was an ancient Persian prophet who founded the first world religion, Zoroastrianism. According to the Zendavesta, the sacred book of the Zoroastrianism was born in Azerbaijan or in northern Persia, probably in the 7th century BC, although some scholars put the time frames for Zoroaster much earlier. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of the lions. Them, their children, and their wives, and the lions had the mastery of them, and break all their bones into pieces, or ever they came at the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote until all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and earth. Who have delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? Daniel 6:11 through 27. A king, a malachim, or a magi, in other words, is a master. Darius was the son of Nebuchadnezzar. This symbolize this is a symbol about initiation. King Darius also represents the intellect because the intellect is the king of the world. That is why Darius recognizes that Daniel is a great prophet and has a lot of knowledge, and it is from God, but his enemies made him write that the law in order to hurt him, and now he has no choice. They say, you signed it, king, so throw Daniel into the lion's den. That's why King Darius was worried about, since he recognized that Daniel was a master, yet King Darius controls the kingdom. Thus, it is precisely an initiatic ordeal, the lion's claws. The lion's claws hide the enigma of fire. The human face is water. Intelligence is the eagle's wings in air, the wings of the spirit. Bull's backs and hooves are the earth, and the tenacity. These are the values which were represented by the Sphinx. The four elements of the solar alchemy. We need the tenacity of the bull, the wings of spirit, and the Sphinx to speak about, and the wings of the spirit. The Sphinx speaks about the great work that we must perform with the four elements. And now I will lead into the panel discussion. All right, brothers, excuse me. I got dry mouth right now. I do not know why. But getting back to the subject at hand, alchemy and hermeticism. Most people, they look at alchemy and a bunch of guys in lab coats in the early ages of European philosophy and pre-modernism, or whatever, what do you want to call it. And they're walking around with lab coats on, trying to hide some type of secret experiment to extract chemicals to make gold. When in theory, most alchemists were using those terminologies as metaphors. These metaphors were there to cover up spiritual practices and belief systems due to oppression from the church and other figures at that time. They didn't want this type of spiritual knowledge to get out there. So the people who practiced alchemy at that time, they learned from the Arabs. And what they learned from the Arabs was not only physical science, but spiritual science. And they modified it to a system where they can communicate and convey messages to those who had attentive ears and who can hear those messages. And later on, that transcended down to the different schools of thought and philosophies that we have today. Primarily, a lot of it has filtered into masonry. The filters into masonry, they're there, but if you're not paying attention to the signs and the symbols, you'll miss them. So hopefully with today's episode that we'll go through, myself and the panelists, we can elaborate and expound on it so everybody can see some connections or get something of value out of alchemy and hermeticism on today's discussion. Good evening, brothers.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
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 Yeah. So I hope y'all like my presentation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Mm,
Yep.
mm,
It was short and to the point. You know,
Yeah.
it captured a whole lot in there. You probably could go hours on some of the things that you spoke on.
Yeah, and that's what I didn't want to do because I
Yeah.
yeah, go a couple hours on a few things. But essentially, when we got a lot of people who look towards Egypt as the center of modern civilization as we know it, as the because of all the science and the things that came from Egypt. So when you look at alchemy and the aspects of it back in ancient Egypt times, dentistry and stuff like that, they were casting gold teeth, for example, and they were working with the alchemical process. And then if you look at the legend of Tubal-Cain, Tubal-Cain, he was a metallurgist, and a metallurgist is somebody who works with different elements and metals to come up with the right compound to make a specific item per se. So we hear a lot that he was an artificer of brass. So to be an artificer of brass, you have to take copper and some other elements and you have to mix them together in order to come up with brass. And the process, it's a constant refinement and melding the things together, breaking it down, taking it apart. And when you think about life and the spirit, throughout life, you're breaking it down and you're taking it apart, picking those elements apart. And you're using earth, fire, wind, and water to do that. And you have those four elements all the time. It's breathing, whether it's just you breathing into a hot tube to make glass or something, but you're taking the elements of nature to create something and transform it. And in spiritual alchemy, which is what I focus on mostly, is it's that same refinement. You're using those, and those elements, the earth, fire, wind, and water, as I mentioned before, I'm not going to go too far into detail on it, but they're represented by the man, the bull, the eagle, and somebody help me with that last one. Got quiet right now. Y'all know the man, the eagle, the bull, and the lion.
The lion.
Yeah, that lion of Judah, lion from the tribe of Judah. Man. But essentially, when we take all of those elements and we start working them inside of us, it leads into different planes and different worlds of existence. And those four worlds are also found in the Kabbalah, which is next month's topic. Yeah, so we'll delve into the Kabbalah a little bit more, and I know it's going to be a lot of different perspectives on it, especially since we have Brother House, who is Jewish. He can break it down from that aspect. I break it down from a different aspect from the way I've learned, and so I believe that is going to be a very interesting night. But when it
Been
comes
waiting
down,
on that.
yeah. When it comes down to alchemy, alchemy is a part of the Kabbalistic system. And the first 4 episodes, including this one, was all leading up to this next episode on the Kabbalah. So the elements that we've been touching on, astronomy, alchemy, and life, death, birth, creation, all of that rolls into Kabbalah, because the Kabbalah is the vessel that transfers that message. And essentially what it means is receiving. Am I saying that right, Brother House?
You are.
It's to receive. So getting back to alchemy and alchemy's role, it's our spiritual development. And again, we're taking one thing and we're turning it into something else. It says, most people say we have a soul, but according to the book, it says with patience, you will get your soul. You will obtain your soul. So how do you obtain your soul? Through spiritual development and awareness. Alchemy basically is the term that covered up knowing thyself. So it's the process of knowing thyself. And they use scientific terms to encapsulate the theory of man knowing thyself, because they can't say, hey, this knowledge is self right here. Because if they said this knowledge is self, I'm trying to figure out myself. You take away the divinity, and you take away the divinity aspect, you get persecuted. So that's why these orders came to be, so they could express their knowledge of trying to know themselves and acquire a realization and self-understanding. And they just so happen to use alchemy, and alchemy is also highly rooted, and not only in alchemical symbols, but highly rooted with the Hebrew alphabet and the 22 letters of the Kabbalah. So every alchemical compound or element can be transcribed into a Hebrew alphabet. And that Hebrew alphabet also can transform, as we know, into a different path of understanding. So if you understand and you break down the alchemical process and you coordinate it with the Hebrew alphabet and the tree of life, you have essentially gained access to some keys of understanding yourself, to spiritually awaken. And it doesn't have to be in death, physical death, that you spiritually awaken. You can do that now. And the yogis in India, the Hindu practices of pranayama, breathing, kundalini yoga, the seven chakras and the 7 yoga centers are identical to elements found in the Kabbalah and the menorah tree, the candlestick. So when you start looking at these things, what is this alchemical process trying to tell me? Is there 7 different elements inside of me that I need to transform from my root to my crown to release my spirit to another level of understanding, which some people call samadhi? And then you step into another plane. And I think I was talking to brother Earl Simpson earlier this week about stepping into another plane while you're physically awake doing astral projection. Most people think astral projection can happen when you're sleeping, but if you come to a level of understanding, you alchemically transmute and transform your thoughts and your processes to a point, you should be able to astral project at any given moment. And it's more of a foresight. It's not an actual being there, but you can kind of foresee things, and you step into an astral world and you can perceive a situation versus actually saying, hey, I'm in the astral world, I'm floating around and I'm seeing all these different things. You can bring it into you while you're physically sitting here. But you have to bring yourself to a level of transformation and understanding to be able to pull that element into your being at that moment. Yes, when you dream, you step into the astral realm and you receive visions then and there, but you can also receive that while you're having a conversation right now. Brother House, go ahead, chop it up.
This is speaking on the astral projection or astral travel. This is from the Sacred Tarot Brotherhoods of Life, and this is under page 269 for those who may have this book or get it. It says magic, and magic arcanum 13 represents the ability to separate the astral body from the physical at will and use it as a vehicle to visit other parts of the earth, to visit the homes of the dead, or to explore the tremendous regions of space. It is that process which is referred to in Masonry as traveling in foreign countries.
I like that. I like that. I like that right there.
Yeah.
I think we were talking earlier in the week. I can't remember. I think it was either in the group or on Facebook, and somebody asked a question. I think it was on Facebook. Somebody asked a question. They said, "Well, what does alchemy have to do with anything?" And I think we just went in. You know what I mean? And as I was doing a little bit of research for this show, I began to realize that, man, there is nothing in nature that is not going through the alchemical process.
Right.
To deny alchemy is to deny the one thing that's ubiquitous within nature, and that's change and transformation. And at the end of the day, that is what alchemy is. It is change and transformation. And that in and of itself, I think that there was a time when man began to understand the alchemical process, going back to some of our older shows, by looking at the stars, studying astronomy, also studying the initiatory process, studying death, right? You know, if talking about building on our previous shows, it gets us right up to here. When you're talking about that initiatory process of life itself, the great work of what they call the magnum opus, right? That in and of itself was the work that we're doing, that great work. I like how Brother Michael touched on a little bit about Tubal Cain being the architect for Hiram Abiff, right? Being an artificer. The one thing I liked about that is if we keep walking through that biblical history, we get to a story about Noah. And if you remember before Hiram Abiff, it wasn't the legend of Hiram Abiff. It was a story about Noah. And we talked a little bit about those alchemical principles, which were fire, air, earth, and water. And you see those principles not just in masonry, but you see them right there in these biblical narratives, right? Because we are on earth, and there was this great flood dealing with water. And then once the Noah's boat came to a rest, he sent the birds out up into the air. And then after he saw that it was all clear, the last thing he did was gave a burnt offering, which deals with fire, right? So we can go all through the different schools of thought, and you will find these alchemical principles embedded into them. Now, it is not my wish to say that we all know that correlation on that fact alone does not imply causation. So I'm not trying to imply that everything in existence has taken somehow from these alchemical um, teachings. What I'm saying is that we can clearly see that there are correlations, and we can speculate that some people borrowed a few things from these. And again, this is just me speculating at this point. Even when we step into masonry, oh my goodness, our penalties. We all, the first degree, the penalty deals with what? But then we go to the second degree. The penalty deals with what? The third degree,
I'm
right?
off.
So at the end of the day, I'm just going to throw it out there because it ain't nothing secretive. We're not going into anything there. But the first degree deals with the water. Then the
Right.
next one's dealing with the air, and the next one's dealing with fire. These things I would say are not coincidence, and I'm going to get into a little bit more about how alchemy ties into masonry, but I don't want to, I guess, hog the floor. I'm a little bit excited, and I'm going to yield and let somebody else step on, and I'll circle back around a little bit later with some other things that I've noticed in
You
reference to alchemy and
you gonna
masonry.
open up a
Okay.
can of worms with something right there when you touched on the Noah thing. I was about to add some stuff to the presentation, but I didn't. But you opened it up when you touched on the Noetic masonry prior to the entire Mabith legend. With that being said, when the story of Noah is another alchemical process of transformation, and the ark being a shittim wood and things like that, that's
Mm,
another that
mm,
represents another level of transformation, because that at the time was the strongest wood of the earth. And then the water, then that burnt off in that flood.
mm.
And what the story of Noah, the way I've come to understand it, it's the story of Noah represents alchemical process of transference or transformation of the different archetypes inside of us. So it's the casting off of the old world, or casting off the old self
Mm, mm,
for the new self and a new life under a new covenant of a rainbow.
mm, mm, mm.
So, and I can't go too far off of that, but
Right, right.
then his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham, he he did not take the alchemical process like the other ones that he saw his father drunk and naked. And that was the old world, the old ways. So he didn't move forward like his brothers did. And I'll leave it there because then we're going into other houses and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
yeah.
I'm with
Well,
you. I'm with you.
Could I
this,
jump
this
in? I see Dr. House over there with the book. Can I get this in real quick?
oh
Just to
yeah, oh
address
yeah,
what
oh yeah.
boy.
what Dr. Watson just said. But
Oh no.
I thought that was real heavy that person. I won't say anything more, but they denied the possibility of alchemy, period. Because unfortunately, within some of our religious systems, they make things like astronomy, astrology, alchemy, works of the devil, works
Yeah.
of Satan. Those are dark arts and things like that. When actually, what that was people telling people that to have them get away from that. They wanted to control what people knew, right? They wanted to control that entire process and keep them within the church and that dogma. But I'm gonna just leave it there. Dr. House.
Well, I just read this real quick because this touch on what Mike was saying and Charles. Masonry and modern masonry, there are something like 6 degrees of the cross, all dealing with some aspect of Arcanum 13. But because of the zodiac, there are 2 crosses, the vernal cross of Aries and the autumn cross of Libra. These degrees of the cross have reference to both of them. The Christian cross of crucifixion is Arcanum 3, astrologically Libra. But there is also a militant cross of resurrection, Arcanum 13, or Aries, symbolized by a sword, which in form is but an inverted cross, even as Libra and Aries are polar opposites in the zodiac. The meaning of these degrees of the cross is that man is born upon the earth through generation, or Arcanum 3, and is born into the next life through physical death, yet his real birth into a spiritual life is brought about through the transformation of his animal tendencies into those that have for their chief object the welfare of the whole of cosmic society.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So it's telling you that we're born into the earth in our physical form, but our whole purpose is to transmute into a spiritual being at what we have called death, but death is just a transmutation into a spiritual being, which is that going from lead to gold.
Mm.
Right.
Have you guys seen the I kind of wish we would have had a couple more diagrams, but we'll give people some homework to do. If you actually go and look at the alchemical symbols, you will see a lot of the alchemical symbols right in like the point within a circle, that was an alchemical symbol for gold, right? And so we know that this all started off what they call the prima materia, right? Which is that oneness, that one that everything came from. And as everything fell down, I would call it, right? Fall down, and we'll roll into a little bit more of this when we get into the Kabbalah, right? What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring about what we call through the great work of philosopher's stone. Now, this philosopher's stone, if you go, this is just homework. Go and look for some of my Masonic brothers. Go and look at the actual symbol for the philosopher's stone. You're going to see a circle, you're going to see a square, and you're going to see a triangle. And if you look at the altar inside of a lodge, you will see on that altar, there's something that will draw out a circle for you. There's something that is symbolic of a square. And if you look at the 3 great lights, it's normally shaped in the fashion of what? A triangle. And it's at the center of what we do. Now I'm gonna keep walking with this just a little bit more. Now, when back in the day when they did this purification to these metals, they put these metals into what was called a crucible. A crucible was like a container that actually took the, like again, you took the different base elements and base minerals and you put them in there and you took them through a purification process. Now, homework to do. If you go and look at the one of, because it's like three different symbols for a crucible, but one of them that jumped out at me looked just like a Masonic apron. Go check it out.
Yep.
Looks just like a Masonic apron. Now check this one out. This was where my mind started to speculate. Okay, I say speculation here. When we come into a lodge, we were told to be divested of all metallic substances, right? Because you were the only type of element that was required to be put into this crucible. And when you came into the lodge, they put an apron on you. They put you into a crucible because you were the elements that was getting ready to be worked on. The great work or that alchemical lab is you. You are what's going into there, right? I tell you, I can go on and on with this. I just got really, really excited when I started doing some research on this, and I couldn't believe the amount of alchemical overtones that I seen inside of masonry. And someone told me a long time ago, a coincidence is something that happens twice. When you see something more than a coincidence, it is no longer a coincidence. There are too many things that are popping up within masonry and other schools of thoughts as well to not have a good understanding that when people constructed these systems, they used things from other different systems that they were studying at that time. But again, for the viewers out there, do a little bit of research. Go look at some of these alchemical symbols. It would blow your mind. Point within the circle, philosopher's stone, and a crucible. That crucible looks just like an apron. And one more point on the apron. The apron consists, if you look at it, it consists of a square and a triangle on the apron. The triangle we know has 3 points. We know that the square has 4 points. We know within masonry, right? We know that we have 7 virtues. We have 3 theological and we have 4 cardinal. And the goal is to take the raw elements inside of you and transform them into something virtuous. Do you see how all of this is tying together? You know, we can go on for hours and hours and hours talking about this. I'm getting really excited. I don't know about you guys, but I'm gonna step back because I want to hog everything. But I tell you, I'm fired up. But I'm gonna pass it over to someone else and let them run with it for a little.
That's that rough ashlar going to a perfect ashlar.
Oh yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
That's right.
Hey, Past Master Watson.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? So I was reading it from what you were speaking about, and I'll send it to the group. It says Freemasonry. It says Spiritual Alchemy by Christopher Earnshaw. Now, it's interesting that you were talking about this because when I read this book, he pointed out a couple things. So during this time before Masonry started getting its revival in 1717, you had the Royal Society, you had the Invisible College, you had the Rosicrucian orders that were going through the same type of thing. They ended up seeing some of that political turmoil that you were talking about earlier that they got in trouble with. So what they did is they hid everything in their symbols. And from when I was doing research and looking at this, I'm thinking if all of us together at Esoteric Lighthouse got together and created something, you would see a little bit of alchemy, you see a little bit of cabal, you see some astronomy, you see some voodoo. And so when you're thinking about how these people put these things together, and you start researching who was there at the time, there's no doubt in my mind that there's alchemy within Freemasonry, just the way that we have our symbols that are taught to teach us to look within ourselves, to transmute ourselves into a higher being. So think about it. Even now when you think about the colors of, let's just take the 4 basic alchemical process. So the black, when you have ash, that darkness, that depth. Then you come up into that white, that purity. So think about when you're raised up, what you get now, you got your gloves, you got your apron, you looking clean in your white. But then you still, and this is what spoke to me, because you always said, what does masonry do for me today? What does it matter for today?
Yeah.
So the reason alchemy matters today is because that 4-step alchemical process tells me that once I shed that old ash, I still have to go through more refinement.
Yes.
What have you done in your life where you did it, you worked on it one time and you were fine? That doesn't happen. If you work out right now, and Brother House could attest, I seen them pictures, Brother House. It was huge. It was huge.
That's Incredible Hulk House.
I know. But look at it. You go ahead, you work out. When you first work out, your body's sore. But then your body gets acclimated to your routine. And then what do? You hit a plateau. So you have to change it a little bit, do more to start to get that perfect body again. And the same thing is spiritual. You know what I mean? Like alchemy, this is like, me and my wife talked about this for like an hour. I love this now. It's the perfect blend of spirituality and chemical process. Because think about it, alchemy was one of the first things that said to study actions on something, like to do an experiment.
Yes.
So that's important for us to understand, because what we're going through in life right now is nothing new. It might be a different time, but the trials and tribulations of like, hey, being tempted by like other women, being good at your job, like, oh, that's the same. It's just different jobs that you're doing right now.
Yeah.
So this process is still in existence. And literally, if somebody takes their time to study this, you'll sit there and see that, one, you'll get confidence of knowing that people before was able to make it, so you could make it too. That's one. And then two, you just understand you have a blueprint of like, how can I create myself into a better being? You know what I mean? So that's why I get excited about alchemy. And then from y'all guys, is anybody that's watching later on Alchemy and Mysticism, this thick boy, I just finished it last night. I appreciate y'all for recommending that to me, but like I said, that's what just gets me excited, what I learned about alchemy. So like I said, I'll pass it on to somebody else, you know? Hey, that book, the truth. That book.
And I tell you that you touched on something earlier. I thought you was going to go through all those colors, but I saw something else. When I looked at those 4 processes, they had 4 colors to them.
Yep.
They had black, white, yellow, and red. Now later on, they became 3 colors. They took the yellow and the red and they combined them together, right? So where in Masonry do you see those colors on the first degree? When I'll give it to you.
You already said it.
Charcoal and clay. You see what I'm saying? And so it's the chalk is white, the charcoal's black, and the clay is red. It's hard for me to believe that these correlations are just out there and there's no connections. Again, when I speak, I always like the people to know that I speak from a space of speculation. Again, because that's what I am. I'm a speculative Mason. And so at the end of the day, I'm speculating on this. I know some people will come and say, well, give me the hardcore facts. I want to go back in time and interview some of these folks so they can tell me that they actually put it in there. I can't do that for you. I can look at the correlations and I can say, you know, this looks real to me. There are alchemical overtones within Masonry, no doubt about it.
And getting back to what you just said, you know, when you look at those colors, I don't know if y'all caught my innuendo on that with my last slide with the 3 wise men, the Magi. And the Magi, in some circles, they say it was Saul, David, and Solomon were the actual Magi. And Saul being black, Solomon being white, Saul being black, David being white, and Solomon being gold. It was 3 different stages of transformation. Then when you go back to the ground floor or the Entered Apprentice, which you just said, chalk, charcoal, and clay, that's also Malkuth. If you look at pictures of Malkuth on a colored Kabbalah tree, and you'll see that Malkuth has those same colors.
All those colors, yeah.
Beautiful.
And see, and that goes back to Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, when God is creating man. The ground itself is called Adonamah, and that's red. And we know in chapter 1, God created light, which became white. But initially, God came out of the darkness, which was black.
Oh man, that's done. Somebody hit the gavel. Oh, we're done. I'm out of here, man. I'm done. Good stuff.
Excuse me, brothers. I missed the lecture.
I mean, you know most of this stuff. You done wrote books on it.
Yeah, right.
For sure.
It's
Salam was at the party.
it's kind of good that you mentioned gold and lead, because it seems to me that in a lot of the readings, it always talks about gold being the most purest and lead being the most impure. Saying gold being the most malleable. It's pure, it can be bent, it's perfect. But it contains all within it. So it's like the seed of all. And that's what we're trying to get to when we look at the spiritual process. We're going from a lead position, a stubborn, a stuck, heavy position, to become malleable and can be formed into whatever we need to be applied to. But I mean, when you look at the whole rituals and things like that, I would even speculate to say, as if what Stephen was saying, is that a lot of things were hidden. And I would almost speculate that maybe the formula to turn lead into gold was hidden in a lot of the ritual. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the elements, if somebody knows how to read and decipher and look within, they could probably write the chemical process within it if you know what to look for. That's probably why it was hidden. So, I mean, it's all speculative in nature, but it's just something to think about. And it kind of like brings into a lot of things into perspective. So I think it's a good topic. This is really good.
Yeah. That was one thing that also I ran across in researching for this show here, and it kind of blew. I was like blown back by it. Some of my brothers in the Scottish Rite will do a quick examination of the camp, and you'll see in the camp we were talking about those three colors, and the three colors of white, black, and red were often depicted as a swan, as a raven, and as a phoenix. And if you look at it, you know, in the Scottish Rite, when you talk about it, the phoenix normally is coming up out of the black ash. You see what I'm saying? And he's normally depicted, when you depict that phoenix, it's normally coming up out of fire. It's normally a red. Like I went and I Googled the phoenix. And when you look at the phoenix, most of the time it's either got red wings or it's coming up out of a fire. A lot of brothers, there's some other definitions for what that actually means on the camp, but that was the first time I had ever ran across that it could have alchemical overtones as well.
Most elements are represented in the
think
camp
about
as
Harry
well.
Potter.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Didn't John B. Love speak to that about the whole alchemical process of Harry?
Yeah, he did. He tore that up. He tore that up. He tore that up. And if you notice, the final product, or that philosopher's stone, was known to be red. And you know, we all know that in masonry, the culmination of our experience, right, from the York Rite side of the house, is the red house, right? You're not totally complete until you have traveled into that area. I found that kind of interesting when I started thinking about this, just on the color red itself. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder, the theme of that house being red, I wonder if that was a coincidence that they decided to make that red. If you look at if you go back to the phoenix being red, I also ran across where inside of the alchemical pictures, because a lot of it's stuff they didn't write down, they coded it in their pictures. I saw a lot of red roses, and I was like, okay, wait a minute, the 18th degree, Scottish Rite. Okay. That whole thing was talking about an alchemical process. You know what I mean? You got the bird there plucking itself, the blood coming out. And, oh man, it just.
And the igneous natura renovatum integrum, or the fire renews the soul.
Yes.
INRI, most people say it means
yeah.
But in the alchemical process, if you understand alchemy and the meaning of that, the Latin meaning of it, it's meaning that through fire your soul is renewed. That's that rebirth. Wow. And then if you understand the 18th degree and the message behind it, and then you go into the York Rite, and then any religious aspect of it, you see that John the Baptist came and he said, I baptize you with water, but the person who comes after me will baptize you with the fire of the Holy Spirit. So
Yes.
when you put those two and two together, you see that Ignis Natura Renovatum Integra. The fire, through the fire, your soul is renewed. It's the same message. It's just an alchemical versus a spiritual theologian's version of the same process. And what is, and you look at baptism. Baptism itself is another alchemical process.
Sure is.
When the purpose of baptism, you're getting in the water to be purified. You're washing away those old elements. And that, if you look at Noah's Ark, what was Noah's Ark? It's the same thing. That ark is the body going into a body of water to be purified, to bring forth a new element and a new covenant.
Yeah. And it's beautiful to be able to look at the same truths from different perspectives. And that is one of the things I loved about when I came into Masonry. You know, people travel to different Masonic bodies and so forth. And even outside of Masonry, they traveled through different schools of thought. But I've always looked at all of this as the same truths spent from different perspectives, right? It's a way of looking at a truth from a different angle, I guess is the best way to put it. The different schools of thought have different blueprints. They have different sets of glasses that you can put on to look. One set of glass I may not be able to see very clear in. You may have to put another set of glasses on to see it, but we're all looking at the same truths. One of my favorite degrees inside of the Scottish Rite is the Night of the Sun. And the Night of the Sun, for some of my Scottish Rite brothers, man, get into that degree. It's just beautiful. It has so many alchemical and hermetic, those two words are pretty much synonymous with one another, overtones in it. It's just saturated through it. It's, man, you can go into that. When I first read that degree, I probably had about 7 or 8 pages of notes, and those notes took me in all kind of different directions. So and that just goes to show you that it's not just the Blue House, it's not just the Scottish Rite, York Rite, any one of these different bodies you go into. We could venture into the Order of the Eastern Star as well, the actual star itself, and we're going to still see these alchemical overtones.
HOJ, the same thing.
Yeah.
And then, but when you look at Hermeticism and alchemy together, like you said, they are synonymous. Alchemy is more of like the vehicle, whereas Hermeticism is the container.
There you go. Thank you for breaking that down too.
Hermeticism is the container because it's the compendium of everything, which includes alchemy, which includes astrology, which includes theology, and all of these other aspects. All the other aspects make up Hermeticism, aka thought from Egypt, or whatever you want to call them. Enoch, Tahuti. You know, so some people, I've read some books that they said Enoch wasn't real, well, it pretty much, most of it is allegory anyway. But Enoch, Thoth, and Hermes were not actual one individual, but a school of people. Bringing all of these thoughts and things together and compiling them into those ancient Egyptian temples and those temples of those days as a storehouse, or the original universities for things outside of traditional thought and traditional things being taught at that moment. So just something to think about. What if these characters were not one individual, but a whole schoolhouse of people?
That's a beautiful way of looking at it too. I've always said, going back to kind of what Stephen was building on a little bit earlier, was we always got to make this stuff walk and talk. So when you tell me about Enoch, I say Enoch's alive right now today, right? If we're today are living out the principles that were taught by Enoch, then Enoch is still alive. If we're just reading about somebody 6,000, 8,000 years ago, then we're no better than someone who practiced necromancy, worship of the dead. You see what I'm saying? We have to bring these characters alive. Brother House says all the time, when you read these books, read them out loud. Become
Yeah,
the character. You
Right.
see what I'm saying?
I
That's
see
what I
that.
think what we miss. We start worshiping the character. We worship I'm not going to use it there. I don't want to
Hey,
offend anyone, but at the end of the
yeah,
day, we start to worship these characters instead of becoming these characters.
Right.
One of the things that Jesus said in the Bible, and I always say to folks, is that he says, greater works than I ye shall do. How and I'm going to accomplish that if I'm not taking what he left me and building upon it? It seems like he was saying to me, take the roadmap I gave you, this blueprint I gave you, and live it out yourself. Become this. And if you do, you will do greater works than I, because I laid it out for you. It's kind of like your coach. Your coach is going to tell you everything that they know about the sport in order for you to be the best you that you can be. You see, it's not for you to worship the coach. Oh, the coach had all of this wisdom and all this knowledge. No, take what the coach has given you, go out on that field and win that game of life. At the end of the day, I would argue that Enoch, Jesus, Noah, all of these characters, if we said they're allegorical, I could argue that they are alive right now today. They've never died.
Well, Samuel Onvior, that was one of his philosophies there. He used to say most of these stories are allegory.
Yeah.
And they are allegory, but the minute you say, I believe, that makes it real. That's what brings life into it. So
yep.
if you say you follow a particular faith, then that person exists. It exists solely to you. So that person is real. So no one can take that away from you.
Yeah, and I would even throw in there, um, because I seen Brother House's antennas go up, right? I know his antenna go up when he hear that word belief, right? I would even say that it starts with belief, faith, but it ends in a realm where we know. And one thing Jesus said, he always talked about, he said, one day you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now, people would say, well, this guy must be a Christian because he keeps using all of these Christian terms. No, I've used alchemical references. I don't look at one school of thought. Jesus's word is just as good with me than if I was quoting Enoch, right? So that's why, at the end of the day, I know people can relate to that. He said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. I think we all start off by believing. I think that belief gets stronger over time, becomes faith. But at some point, we actually walk into that realm that at some point we don't need the belief anymore because we actually know. If I was to say to Brother House right now, I got $5 in my pocket right now. Brother House could say, Brother Watt, I believe you. But if I went into my pocket right now and pulled out $5 and showed him, he would no longer have to believe. Belief would be irrelevant. He would know at that point.
Knowledge.
But at
Yeah.
but at the beginning, he would probably have to take my word for it and believe and try to look for more information, right?
And Brother Watson, that's the same thing I was talking about when you understand that the astral world, you can tap into it at any given moment right now. That's that knowing that that thing is there or this is going to happen or how it happens. It's clairvoyance. People think clairvoyance is some type of hodgepodge magician stuff, but clairvoyance only means clear vision.
Mm, mm,
When you got clear vision, you have the foresight to see things. And that is when you learn how to transmute your energy for positive things instead of negative things. And when you realize and you encapsulate, you embody that, you can enter the astral world immediately and say, okay, I can pull something. And it's called. Some people say, I got great recollection of something I read or something I heard, but um, what the hell was the name of that movie? Not Inception. If you've seen Inception, that was a great movie
Inception was
too.
good. Yeah, it was.
But
It was.
But I think this one had Bradley Cooper in there when he took that pill and he got like.
Oh, I remember I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Limitless.
Prince just posted
Limitless.
Limitless.
Yeah.
Yeah, Limitless.
What up, Chris? Yeah.
Ooh. We might have to bring that back when we talk about the Kabbalah, that limitless.
Oh yeah.
Limitless. That was
Yeah,
a great one.
we definitely.
Yeah.
But when you look at something that like that, well, he made a statement where he says, okay, all right, I can read a book about 50% to 75% through, then I already know the end.
Mm.
Then, or I can learn a language and I can learn half the language, but I can translate everything else and understand it and be able to speak back to it. That's essentially what the astral world represents. That clairvoyance is that, where you get a level of understanding where you can feel and you can understand, and it transcends not only to you but to other people. You can transcend and understand people, just basic. And some of it is just real simple. Facial expressions is the main way that we tap into the astral. It's a communicative mechanism that subconsciously is inside of us, and we see it. We don't see it in our physical, we see it with our physical body, but it's translated in an astral language.
Right, like body language.
Yeah, body language is an astral language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And I often, like, I don't like to go spooky with people, right? And when I say spooky, I'm not talking about the astral stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that, like, when I say spirit and stuff like that, people will say, well, what is spirit? Normally people say spirit is something I can't see and touch and stuff like that. Then I would argue that wouldn't your thoughts be spiritual? Wouldn't your
Absolutely.
thoughts be in a spiritual realm? Because at the end of the day, right now, I'm looking at a couple of people right now, and I know you're thinking, but I can't see your thoughts. I can't
Right.
see your thoughts until they actually transmute or go through an alchemical process and show up as your facial expressions or something that comes out of your mouth,
Or your
right?
words or your
Yeah,
actions. Right. Yeah.
but these different realms, as Brother Williams was saying earlier, these different realms, we give them names. And sometimes I think people get lost when we talk about the names. When we say the astral plane, well, we know it exists. You could call it whatever you want it to, right? We know that there is realms or planes of existence outside of the plane of existence that we can detect with our five senses. Why? How can you prove that to yourself? Get a dog whistle and blow it. You will notice your dog can hear that and you can't.
Yeah.
So does it exist? Of course it does, but you can't detect it with your five senses. But what happens when you start to go back? Because we talked about this in one of our shows. We're all really one. It's all one. I think you get down to a point where you only can communicate using your five senses when you really start to fall in love with, I'm Charles Watson. That's who I am. So my
Wow.
mode of communication is locked. It's encapsulated into my five senses. But once I start drifting to the point where I realize this body here is not who I really am, and I start to transcend that, then it's limitless, as we mentioned earlier.
Right.
Limit.
You don't
And
mind if I tap in? Can y'all hear me okay?
yeah, we
Yeah,
can.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. I missed the lecture, but something was on my mind to contribute as far as alchemy. And he touched on it when he was talking about the dog whistle and frequency. Well, there's a music producer called The Alchemist. Some of you may be
Hmm.
familiar with it. He produced for Mobb Deep, Jay the Kiss. He produced the song "We Gonna Make It." Well, Alchemist, he does something like myself and other music producers do. He samples. I also make original material, but when you sample, it's similar to the alchemical process of turning lead into gold because you take one piece, you break it down, and then you put it back together in a process to make a new musical arrangement. So I just wanted to share that how modern day music, hip hop, when we sample, it's also a form of alchemy.
Isn't that beautiful? That
That's
and
dope.
and that was the point we were trying to make the other day when a brother was asking, what does this have to do with anything? Alchemy, it's
Right.
and I think it was Brother Coney that said, well, making toast. I think he did something as simple as that. When you get up in the morning and you make breakfast.
Right.
I would argue that there's nothing within this realm of existence that we can detect that
Right.
is outside of the process of alchemy, literally.
Right.
Well, like that speaks to a key thing when we talk about the different aspects of society, like learning the human body and studying medicine. Like when we breathe and our lungs convert that air, there is fire that happens in your lungs. You just don't see it. It's so minute. And it produces the oxygen that your body needs to take and turn it into the blood to digest it. But because you don't know that, you don't study it, you don't think to call it alchemy, so you don't think it's something spooky. You just do it all the time. It's an innate thing. You know what I'm saying? Your body's contained with water. That water goes through an alchemical process through your liver and your kidneys. It's cleansing, it's purifying. So that's why you go to the bathroom all the time. So there's things going on that we are not aware of because we don't study. And see, so I'm not a mechanic, but a mechanic can tell me, well, if I put this gas in here, there's some internal combustion is going to happen, and that's going to give off some fumes, and it's going to give me some gas, and I'm going to hit it, and the car's going to go fast. That's an alchemic process. But because I'm not aware, I don't know, I'm not going to call it that. And that's what I'm saying. So when we use certain words, it throws people off, and everybody gets all spooked out about it. It's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It's just a different way of calling it what it is in a very historical fashion. We use this word because it's all encompassing of certain steps and processes that comes out to an end result. Whatever you can call it making Kool-Aid. It doesn't really matter. Point of the matter is you're still adding chemicals and creating something from that. And that's all it is. That's all it is.
And it's the same process. Well, it's the greatest, as far as I can think, of an alchemical process is conception. I mean, when the sperm hits the egg, a flash of light takes place. And there's that let there be light. And a single cell organism becomes a multi-cell organism. And over 9 months, you have a living, breathing human being. That in itself is an alchemical process. And
the water breaks.
Exactly. So we
then the
go
Great
through
Flood.
this whole process of darkness, blackness, red, which is the clay, which man, Adam or Adamah, and then we have the air, and then we have the light, and then we have life, which the child doesn't actually become living in this existence until it takes its first breath inwards, its first inhalation. And that inhalation is the breathing in Adam's nostrils that made him a living, breathing soul.
But prior to that, they ate from that tree of life. Have you seen what the placenta looks like? The veins and vessels, and it looks just like a tree.
And people normally don't like, we all know you can't live very long without water, right? A few days. People normally don't look at air and thinking as being synonymous. But I would say hold your breath for a while and see if you don't lose consciousness, right? So it's like, the one thing that keeps us going, as you were saying a little bit earlier, Brother Coney, is when you breathe in, there's a process that takes place inside of the lungs, right? Because then your blood comes through, grabs the oxygen from the lungs, right? And then takes it all throughout your system and feeds the different cells, including your brain, right? And if that oxygen doesn't get there, you're done. You won't be, you'll get a little woozy. You can't think clearly. So literally that air, the very air that we were talking about that was breathed into Adam's nostrils is synonymous with consciousness. You wouldn't even be conscious if you didn't have that air that was coming into you.
And that's the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Right.
So did y'all catch that? I mentioned that in the lecture.
That breath or that air in Hebrew is called ruach, and kodesh is holy. So when you say Holy Spirit, the word ruach also translates to spirit. So ruach kodesh literally means Holy Spirit. So what people have to understand is, people talk about, well, Jesus said he had to leave so that the Holy Spirit can come. Well, the Holy Spirit has always been here. That is the inhalation that you breathe in every day. And as long as you're breathing in, that is your saving grace, because we all at some point in time will exhale one last time, and that is the death.
And you look at it too, the when you go to, you gave the Hebrew, if you go into the Greek, it's pneuma. When you say Holy Ghost, now pneuma, we all know, if you study the word pneumonia, pneumonia, when you get pneumonia, it's a respiratory infection. You see what I'm saying? So when we're talking about, whether it be in Hebrew, because I know there's some people out there say, well, that ain't what it says in the New Testament. Yeah, it's the same thing. We're talking wind and breath. We're talking about air. The ancients knew what they were talking about, but over time, it spooked out. We got what I call the movie theater. We started associating ghosts with Casper. You see what I'm saying? This phantom type character that floats around that I personally have never seen. But at the end of the day, the Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost, that's the level of consciousness that you will reach at some point, where you will know the truth. As Jesus would say, one day you shall know. And he said the Comforter will bring it to your remembrance.
Yeah, and I spoke on that a little bit in the lecture when I was talking about
You
the
sure did.
word alchemia ending with a H, and the Hebrew letter hey, being breath. So with that,
in the Latin, you brought up the Latin too. Was it a spira? I think it is.
Yeah,
if I didn't,
spira.
Yeah.
But so that begs the question: when a child is born, he looks for that first sound to be made, take that first breath, because they've been in water all this time. So is the spirit entering the body when they take the first breath, or is the body just a shell for those 10 months? That's always been a debate when we talk about certain sensitive topics. They say that the body is just a shell. It doesn't have a consciousness. It doesn't have a spirit within, because it has not taken its first breath outside of the body of the mother. That's one
power.
But see, the thing about that is, as long as the child is attached to the tree of life, the placenta, that child is receiving the breath of life from that which is called Chokmah, or the mother, or the wisdom, or wise. And the oxygen that the mother inhales is transferred through the body through to the child. And that's why the child is able to move and actually perceive what is taking place on the outside, on the inside. And there's the whole as above, so below, as within, so without. That child knows that if you touch this side of the mother's stomach, the child can move over there to touch whatever is touching that. So the child is conscious, and the child is aware, even though that the baby is still within, and that child is also still breathing. And when you look at ultrasounds and things of that nature, you see the heart is beating. You see that the ventricles within the brain are there, those 4 veils. So we see these things within the embryo and within the baby within the womb while it's in that darkness. So we also see that the child's eyes can open while it's in there. So what is the child seeing while the eyes are open in darkness?
So I'm about to tie this together for y'all real quick.
Okay. All right, let's do it.
So as Brother Watson mentioned earlier, the 5 senses, and Brother House is just talking about the baby being inside the womb.
Right.
And I've been talking about the astral realm. What the baby is doing is living out its life through the astral world. It does not know the physical world of the 5 senses. So what does the 5 senses do for us? The 5 senses only does one thing. It translates physical matter and physical manifestations of this realm into the astral realm. It is recording. That's what the 5 senses do. They record and translate into the astral realm, where the baby is in the astral realm waiting to be exposed to this realm.
I like it. I like that.
So I'm gonna play first grader here. I'm gonna play first grader. All right. So what you're saying is the baby inside the womb is like being a part of the matrix. I'm only seeing what the mother's saying. I'm not seeing the actual outside yet. Once that
Right.
detachment happens, then my five senses kick in, and now I am seeing what's projected, and now my body is actually computing that. Is that what I'm
Right.
saying? I'm not taking what's being given to me from the mother anymore.
Right.
I've been taken out of that.
Yeah, you've been unplugged
Right.
from that mother.
And
So that baby,
that,
you saying that
and
baby
see,
is subordinate at that time? Is a subordinate lodge per se of the mother lodge.
Subordinate
He's in the
lives. Okay.
subordinate
You
lodge.
feel,
Right. All
you feel
right.
that
All
baby
right.
getting
Okay.
sensation to work, you know, a charter or warrant to work upon,
Right.
you know, by itself when it
Okay.
breathes
Yeah.
and starts to use the five senses. Okay, that makes
and
perfect
see,
Yeah.
sense.
and when we think about that, from what Mike is saying, the child, while it's in the womb, literally is living in an astral projection type environment. Is
Right.
literally in heaven, and when the child is born, the child now falls from heaven. That is the fall of man,
Talk
because
about it.
in the Pseudeographa of the Old Testament, in the Wisdom of Solomon, it tells you that all beings came into this existence from first being born from a woman's womb of 9 to 10 months,
Right.
and then the child falls from the womb unto the ground. Because in the old days, women gave birth standing or squatting, and the child fell into the hand of a midwife, or literally to the ground of the clay, which the clay was red. And when you pick up the child then itself is covered in red clay. And this is
Mm.
where these allegories and metaphors and things come to play. And you understand the fall of man. And from that fall of man, man has, and I'm not trying to get in a sexual way, but man fell from the womb, and it is man that always continues to try to return to the womb. And by returning to the womb, we procreate and create more life.
And the beautiful part
Right.
about all of this too is, going into what Brother House was saying is one of the things I always try to hammer home when I talk to different people is that, you know, someone could argue with Brother House, they can argue with me and the rest of the brothers on here and say, well, I don't see the fall of man being that. Okay, I get it, because your school of thought teaches you that fallen man is something else. But pull back the allegory, pull back that it's still telling you about something that failed. That's what we miss. We get into arguing with each other. No, I believe it fell because a walnut came and dropped out of a tree or something. And then we start arguing about that.
Right.
But the lesson that we were supposed to get, because people come from different cultures, we come from different latitudes and longitudes on the planet Earth. But if you take a computer and you put it in Africa and let it run, it will calculate certain types of equations. If you take that same computer and you put it in the United States of America and leave it for a while, it'll calculate the same equation. Well, that's what your brain is. So the humans were put on different parts of this planet. We're calculating these equations. They're the same equations. The process in which we get to those equations may be slightly different. And we're arguing about these things. At the end of the day, this is about a fall. We fell from grace. We're trying to get back up. You got all these different stories and cultures that are trying to teach you the same thing. Man, perfect yourself. Rise up out of the rubbish pile. Up out of that rubbish pile of vices and superfluities, up into the square of virtues. That's what Masonry teaches, but we can go on with other different schools of thought.
And they're all alchemical processes.
They're all alchemy ties them all together. One of the definitions you gave earlier, Brother Williams, I know I'm messing this word up, but it's the Latin for breath, which is spira, I think it was. If you look at the words that have that in it, like let's say respire, a respiration is dealing with breathing. When you're talking about expire or expiration, when you expire, you're giving up the breath. Or conspire, if we were all to get together and we're in one room breathing together, and we start thinking about a conspiracy to do something. All of this is dealing with breathing. If I had what we call, people say, well, I'm inspired by God. What does inspiration from God mean? You see what I'm saying? If people says that my my inspiration, or my, was one more I'm looking for, it's on the top of my head. It's that we always say we got inspiration. What is the other one? What is it?
Muse?
No, it has aspire in there. It's kind of like when you're motivated.
Aspiration.
Aspiration. There you go. Who was that said that?
Salam al
Hey, thank you, brother. That's what I was looking for. You know, our brothers would say, well, I'm inspired, or I have aspiration. All of this has to do with wind and breath. The words themselves are in there. If you want to get in contact uh, with the higher aspect of your nature, it's gonna come through you being consciously aware, you rising up to that spiritual level. If you remember, some of the old Buddhists used to get in there and they would breathe. They had breathing rituals that they would do.
Those are called pranayamas.
What are they called?
Pranayamas. Breathing
Pranayamas.
techniques.
Breathing
And
technique.
then, you know, they got certain ones. One of my favorite ones, it reminds me of Boaz and Jaqen. It's a pranayama where you breathe through one nostril going in,
Yeah.
going out, then vice versa. It's like,
like the
it's
moon and
going
the
up and
sun.
down. It's like a centrifuge. And that was one of the first things I noticed when I entered the lodge at 21 years old. I'm seeing these, you know, people moving back and forth, going, you know, the junior deacon and the senior deacon, the way they move, it's just like the pranayama.
Yeah.
And what's in the center? The altar. And what's in the center of your chest? And I'll leave that alone. But
And you know, in Islam, in the Quran, it talks about I believe it was Shaitan being created of what they call smokeless fire. And I used to ask myself, like, smokeless fire, what kind of fire has no smoke to it? But if
Electricity.
electricity is one of them, and also the fire that burns inside of you has no smoke to it. If you and there is a flame in you, and when that flame goes, matter of fact, something that's synonymous with being dead is you're cold. you're no longer
right.
you're no longer burning. There's a burning that takes place in us every single day. Matter of fact, when we work out, they say you're burning calories, right? And the
Right.
ash that comes out of that burning process is basically your feces. It's the part that just doesn't burn.
We're a
But
furnace.
there you go. We are a thermodynamic process at the
Correct.
at the end of the day.
Correct. Correct. And that's why people don't
A
believe
smokeless fire.
That's why people don't believe you can spontaneously combust. It can happen at any given time because your body is a total equilibrium of chemicals happening at every second. If there's any imbalance, your body can implode or explode. It doesn't really matter, and it can happen. It can happen throughout the entire body or in a central organ. That's why some people say their heart explodes. That's happening from something not being able to move freely. There's a clog happening, and it's going to explode. It's still going to happen. It's going to happen. It happens.
Strokes, brain aneurysms, things of that nature.
Yeah. And then I learned the other day, a stroke, the reason they call it a stroke is actually when that clog happens on the brain, when you take the x-ray, there's an actual, look like somebody took a marker and stroked something on your brain.
Really?
There's a mark left, like a stroke.
Wow.
I didn't know that till the other day.
Yeah.
So it was like pretty cool. Yeah.
But you know what? My point of bringing that up about Shaitan is Brother House posted something earlier today on Facebook, and I had chimed in about a lot of folks, when we look at evil or what we perceive to be evil, I always like to say so-called evil, so-called bad and good, right? Because I don't think they really exist. From our perspective, it does, but in reality, they don't exist. And so at the end of the day,
transcended.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, I always try to remind people is that evil can't be associated with something called a devil. You know what I mean? Unless that is within me. Because at the end of the day, if we looked at, and we talked about this before, if we look at deity as being all omnipotent, just all omnipresent, right? Then there can be nothing that exists outside of all. So all could never have an adversary. There could never be anything up against all. So this little devil thing that we're talking about has to be something that's adverse to me. not all. You understand? Because the devil would have to be within all. It can't be outside of it and be adverse to it. So when I mention that smokeless fire, it's because I have that smokeless fire within me. And the lower aspect of my nature is what I think the ancients were trying to convey to me about this devil, right? We're looking for this movie character with the pitchfork and all that other good stuff. That doesn't exist. This devil is you. You are that devil. And you are also, the good news, you're also that angel as well.
Right.
You know, that fallen angel anyway. You fell
If
Well,
from
you
grace.
if
yeah,
you look at what was the movie Lucy, there was a
Yeah.
moment when she described there are no opposites. We always
Right.
think of everything black, white, 1-0, good and bad. There is nothing. Because if you think God being omnipotent and omniscient, he is everything. And if he's everything, what you trying to understand from your feeble mind and construct, you think that there is an opposite, but there isn't. It's just
Right.
deterministic upon the situation. What one person might seem evil is actually good, depending on what is going on in that situation.
Yeah.
So there is no personification of a devil or a God or a bad or a good. It's just deterministic upon that situation. Just like the earth and in the solar system and the universe, there's chaos. Some might call that to be bad, but
Right.
something is born out of that chaos. Planets are formed, solar systems, galaxies, everything. So there's a reason for that. But we may call that destruction, but what God calls is creation. So again, that's your feeble mind trying to understand a construct and trying to say, yeah, that's good, that's bad, or whatever. That's not how it is. I would even go as far as to say, okay, I tread carefully when I say this. If I was to say war could be a good thing. Now somebody may say, what are you talking about? People dying. No, death is not a bad thing. It's a needed thing. It needs to happen because there's a wheat and tear. There's
Most
a
necessary.
process. There's a balance. Because if you look at every thought process, every what's the word I'm trying to get to? Like higher thinking, and a lot of the movies that we've seen now is they don't call it a bad guy. The bad guy says, I have a purpose. I'm supposed to do this to keep balance in the universe.
right.
So you may think I'm
Thanos.
going to kill everybody, but that's not what I'm doing.
But
I have a
war,
purpose
but
to keep
war is,
balance.
yeah, war would be necessary. I could look in nature and see, like, my white blood cells. When
Right.
something is attacking me, my blood cells get their sword and they get ready to go to war, right? So we know the concept of war exists within nature and it's most necessary. It's the human mind that has fell from grace that gets locked into this world of the dichotomy. The goal was for us to rise back up and see that it's only one. Matter of fact, a brother used to have this saying that he would say to me, and it took me a long time to figure out what he was saying. He would say, I see you looking at me to see if I'm looking at you, to see if we are looking. And I used to say, what the heck is he talking about? But what he's saying, if I look you in your eye, I can see you looking at me to see if I'm looking at you, to see if we are looking. The only thing that exists is us. Right here on this panel. There is nothing in existence but us. You
Right.
understand what I'm saying? There's only one of us, and it's personifying Charles, House, Williams. You see what I'm saying? We're
And
all
and
characters in the mind of deity to put it in
And
a way that we can
and
understand.
and
that's
each represents
and
a
that's the
degree of
secret.
understanding.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the secret
From my
because
perspective.
we're trapped in an illusion of duality when there is
Illusion.
no such thing as duality.
It's
There's
only a
only
singularity.
singularity.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why it says akkad in Deuteronomy 6:4. That is the highest praise of the Jewish faith is Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Akkad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. And that
Mm.
one, akkad, actually means unified. And it's telling you and those who understand akkad that everything is unified in the one singularity, the one existence. And that's why it says that I am he, and besides me, there is no other.
It's
Right.
And
beautiful.
we're all contained in that one. And I remember, I think a couple of shows ago, I mentioned if we think about it, we see the illusion of light, we look out into what we deem as space and we see stars and stuff, but all of that is contained in one single darkness that contains all of that.
Yes.
So we can't separate ourselves from the earth because we're within the earth. The earth cannot separate itself from the solar system because it's inside the solar system. And
And that's Hermeticism.
right. And the solar system cannot separate itself from the universe.
As above,
because
so below.
There it is. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's all one.
Right.
all
Yeah.
right, my brothers, that's an awesome. Oh, I thought somebody was talking. That's an awesome segue
Go ahead.
into our brother Judas, right?
Oh, you
So
didn't
I told
Hey,
y'all
I've been waiting on this.
because y'all started earlier with the 30 pieces of silver, and Frada Salam went into the degrees, right? So, man, it's crazy how things happen. So remember, we said this book is powerful, right? This Eternal Tarot book. So I went to 13, which is immortality.
Or death.
I'm reading up on it thinking it's going to tell me about immortality, but guess what it tells me about? It says the 13th arcanum is death, but it also can signify something new. It can be wealth. It can be misery. It is a number with a great synthesis. So then hits me from left field. I was like, okay, the 13th arcanum contains the gospel of Judas. Judas represents the death of the I. And we always talk about that ego, right? The gospel of Judas is the gospel of death. It is the gospel of the dissolution of the ego. Judas symbolizes the ego, which must be decapitated. I was like, whoa.
And you know what? That piggybacks too.
I'm
That
sorry for putting you on to that, brother.
I tell you that also, like I used to ask the question: was Judas necessary? Would we would have ever had the resurrection and the ascension without Judas's part, right? So Judas was necessary. It's kind of like when we throw those metals into the crucible, heat is necessary. We have to apply heat to those metals, right? It's the same thing with the ruffians. If you look at it, the ruffians is the heat that we use, right, in order to transform the lower aspect of our nature into that higher aspect of our nature. You know, going back to not the literal interpretation of the ruffian, someone coming in and beating up someone, roughing them up, but the underlined representation of the ruffians. Like I was taught, the first ruffian was symbolic of my own envy and jealousy, my debauchery and my lasciviousness. It was the ugly that was inside of me. I was taught that the second ruffian was the misfortunes in life, people who betrayed me. I'm getting ill. All of these things really are not negative. They are the heat that shapes our character, that shapes who we are, that helps us move into the higher aspect of ourselves. And finally, one day we get to the point where the caterpillar gets a reward. He gets to move into being a butterfly, and we hit the last ruffian, which is death. And as Brother House said earlier, and many brothers on here have said before, death is not the end. Death is man, I know this sounds kind of spooky. It's the beginning or the reward. And I know some of us in our psyches have been taught to demonize death.
Right.
Brother Salam, did you have something?
Yeah, I was saying it's the continuation, right? Because before you've been in that realm longer than you've been in this.
Oh man, I know a brother that said that one time.
I said to quote you, Brother Walker. Did y'all speak about those ruffians being an alchemical process? And
Yes.
The main character being possibly the philosopher's stone?
Whoa, I like that.
Did y'all speculate on that?
I like that.
Mercury, whatnot?
Yeah. Yeah, we touched on the Philosopher's Stone a little bit. I think Brother Watson talked about it. I mentioned it and things like that. I want to touch on the story of Judas real quick.
Yeah.
So when you look at Judas and Jesus from an alchemical or spiritual or sexual alchemy premise, you see that Judas represents the lower man, represents that lower nature of man, that animalistic tendency. He is that virile energy that wants to go out and expel his hydrogen T12. What is hydrogen T12? Hydrogen T12 is an element of sperm. It is that thing that makes up sulfur or Lucifer or that light within the sperm.
I like that.
That is Judas, whereas Jesus represents that spiritual side of man that wants to transmute that energy to that sexual energy and that energy within to create the Christ in you or anoint yourself with the chrism.
Brother Michael. Brother
Yes.
Michael, would you put that as Hesed and Gevurah, meaning mercy on one side and that severity? Like the one meme you had posted earlier, and I had to really take a look at that again, but you were talking about the super ego and the ego. So you
Right.
called Judas ego. Ego wanting money. Why do you want money? You know, who would want money? But he took money to sell out his brother in that story. So
Right.
he would be that severity, and then his brother being the mercy, as everyone speaks about.
Right. You're right. But at the same time, that money, those 30 pieces of silver, those 30 pieces of silver represent something else. They represent, silver represents the lunar aspect of man or the lunar body. And Jesus represented that solar body. So the body, those two bodies basically were one that separated. So Judas, he took the 30 pieces of silver into a solar, not a solar body, but a lunar body. A lunar body can't encapsulate all the energy as we are taught that the sun can. So the lunar body is that reflection, and the sun is that actual vessel that can obtain, and it not only gives out light, but it can take in more light per se.
Oh my
So
goodness.
by Judas, what's that?
Oh my fault. I don't know if you can hear me well. I'm tapping in.
Yeah.
Since we talking, I know before you had spoke about an eclipse. So would that be we put the main character at Tiferet, beauty, for the sun, you know, and then we would put Judas with the pieces of silver representing lunar. We would put him at your side, right?
Right.
Foundation,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then
Well, Yesod,
earth.
if you look at Yesod on the tree of life, and you superimpose a man or a woman on the tree of life, superimposed on that Yesod falls right into that aspect where you're saying it's right there on those sexual organs.
Mm-hmm.
Yesod, it has so many different meanings um, through the alchemical Kabbalah, not the traditional Jewish Kabbalah, which that's Brother House's area, but
So,
through the alchemical Kabbalah, that Yesod is that of the sexual organs, and there is where the energy is transmuted. And if you know how to work the middle pillar, you go up through dot, and once again, you create that chrism. You become anointed. But that, it's the seven churches or the seven chakras as well. It's the Shekinah. But
okay.
I don't want to jump into any other houses right now, so I'm gonna shut up. But when you take all of these things and those allegories in that book, yes, they are real, but it's how I think either Brother House or Brother Watson said it, how you look at those things and how you encapsulate those things. That although they're different, it is the same. It's just a different variation. It's a story that's told in degrees. And I keep saying degrees for a particular reason. Everything works in degrees. There is always a degree in something. Will Smith had a movie called 6 Degrees of Separation.
Oh,
And if you ain't ever seen that movie was dope. And it's basically talking about that every individual on the planet is separated by 6 degrees. By us being communicating here and talking to somebody Like Brother Coney, he may talk to somebody at work who knows my brother or knew somebody that knew somebody in my family. And that's what the 6 degrees of separation basically represent. And the movie Cloud Atlas touched on that too.
Yeah.
But the same characters were still connecting
Correct.
those different times.
Right.
You saying degrees of
See,
temperature as well? Yeah.
and see, to jump back on what we was talking about with the alchemy in the natural world, back in good old sacred tarot, it says occult science, natural alchemy embraces those processes which take place slowly in nature, but which man can hasten and utilize for himself if he possesses significant knowledge.
Yes.
To this end, therefore, he studies all the transformations that have taken place in the world, physical, biological, mental, and religious, that he may perceive just what nature has thus accomplished, having arrived at a comprehensive knowledge thus of relation of things to each other and to himself. He utilizes this information to bring those transmutations to pass, which in this new wisdom he now most desires.
You know what? I'm gonna say this because this is good. So here it is, and this goes back to Judas talking about the 30 pieces of silver. Silver is the moon. Redemption. Redemption from what? Redemption from the fall. Why do you need to know that you fell? That's the knowledge that you need to have, that you need to be redeemed and brought back to your original purpose and intent. What is above silver? Gold. See, it all comes back to play right there and then and there. That is it right there. And that's what I was talking about the other day on Facebook. I think a lot of people miss the purpose and intent of being in this organization. It's not just about the things that we see on the surface. It's about making you what you originally were. It's not about nothing else. And if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing to get back to your original place and position in earth, because the Bible says earth groans for the earnest manifestation of man. Earth is waiting. Not somebody, earth is waiting because it knows where you came from and is waiting for you to do what you're supposed to be doing. And you can't do it if you don't know. So you need to read and learn. I don't understand why that's so hard to understand. And that's, I'm sorry I'm getting on my soapbox, but that's the thing I think a lot of times we miss. And that's what Judas represents to me, is that Jesus knew that he was going to betray him per se because he had to be redempted in order to be a sacrifice. He could not be pure unless he was sold like a slave for 30 pieces. That's what 30 pieces was done. That was the price of a slave sold in Egypt, 30 pieces.
Now, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And this is gonna hammer home to what you were saying. Because again, I could hear people already saying, well, I can argue what he's saying. I don't see Judas as being that. I see him as, but the thing is, we're going to get to arguing this surface level stuff and we're going to miss the real messages. Like, this is the one that gets me with people. If I said to you right now, 1 + 1 = 2, and you say to me, I say, is that true or false? You would say it was true. And then I would ask you, is that Jesus? And you would say, no, that's mathematics. And I would say, according to Jesus, he said, I am the way. I am the what? Truth.
And the light.
And the
So
light.
so at the end of the day, when you're dealing with, people don't look at it that way. They don't look at it that what will set you free in life is the truth.
That's right.
And that is Jesus in any shape, way, or form in your life. If you go 1 + 1 = 2, that is the truth. If you go 1 + 1 = 3, you're dealing with something that is not the truth.
That's right.
This is what these stories were meant to. well, I would say
I'm
probably.
just saying, one and one, you get 3.
Right. Okay. I would say that if you was a physicist, if you studied physics, you might could convince me of that, right? But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that we have to start looking at these things for what they really are. We can go all day long, but if they're not applicable to us, if they're not useful to us and we're just arguing about something that happened 2,000 years ago, man, God, it's not doing us any good. It's not helping us with the great work.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? And when I look at Jesus, like I say this to my wife from time to time, if someone was to say to me today, have you accepted Jesus in your life as your Lord and your personal Savior? I could argue with you that I haven't, but then I would say to you that I have, because I have accepted the truth in my life. And the truth is my Lord and my personal Savior, period. And that confuses a lot of people. I'm not talking about the figures that you have that you put on your neck, the guy that dies on the cross, or some story that's told 2,000 years ago. I'm talking about truth. And Jesus, the story of Jesus, he tried to hammer it home several times. He said that one day you shall know. He was a Gnosis. He studied Gnosticism. He valued knowing.
That's right.
You shall know the what? Did he say a lie? A fallacy? Did he said you would believe? He said you would know the truth, and it will make you free. Nothing else.
And that's how
Nothing
he
else.
knew that he and the Lord are one.
Yeah,
Because he
yes, he
knew
did. Yes,
there
he
was
did.
no separation.
Yes, he did. And that was why he was deemed Son of God. He was deemed the Son of God at that time because of his level of consciousness. He literally freaked people out when he said, matter of fact, I think they wanted to, that's why they killed him, right? Because he ran around and said, I and the Father are one.
That's when they picked up stones to stone him.
Yeah.
That he
Now,
prayed.
but the thing is, you got to know that he knew that there was something greater than him. He understood that concept because he said that he was not greater than he who sent him.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? So he understood that in actual reality, there's nothing here but deity.
That's it.
There's nothing here. I am an illusion. I know I look real, but I'm just an illusion. It is it.
And that's why you can't separate the fruit from the tree in which it bears.
Yeah.
A seed is only as perfect as the source from which it comes.
Yeah.
And it's
All of this,
all alchemy.
all of it is alchemy. I know Brother Williams ready to wrap this up. I know he's ready
Yeah,
to
he
wrap
like,
it
I
up.
gotta go home.
Yeah, I think we hit the 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, too.
Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to the Esoteric Lighthouse. And next month's subject is going to be a haymaker. So y'all best to be prepared. I know y'all had y'all pens and papers ready today, but next month when we go over this Kabbalah, it's going to be something fierce because we got so many different levels and different aspects we can touch on with this. Sometimes Faiz with his, with his understanding from his different schools of thought, my understanding of the Kabbalah that I've learned, then all of us, you see that book, brother Chris L. Lewis L. got right there. We all been reading this book this whole month, and I'm telling you, that book right there is amazing. And I wasted so much money on abridgments of the Zohar that I shouldn't have ever wasted money on. And I should have just got a Zohar instead of the abridgments trying to understand this thing. Because that book right there puts so much into perspective. And we all been reading it. So y'all better be ready for this next show.
The introduction is a book. Like Brother House told me, he was like, yo, he's like, don't skip the introduction. You can't skip the introduction.
No, you can't. No, you can't.
You gotta dig in. You gotta dig in.
Man.
Yeah, this is that next show is gonna be on fire, no doubt. No doubt.
All right. Well, once again, good evening, fellas. Some of us may stay on in the back for a little bit, but it's a wrap.
Yeah, I'm gonna